At first glance, it might look like Chicago's digging yet another subway tunnel. And that makes sense. The city's growing and the infrastructure needs improving. All true. But not this time. This tunnel is meant to be completely filled with water. Deep Tunnel Project. The names of projects can sometimes surprise us or leave us scratching our heads, but here in Chicago, they went with something straightforward. Deep Tunnel Project. Not the most creative, sure, but what more do you really need? It's hard to get the full idea just from the name because, really, there isn't just one tunnel, it's a whole network of them. Construction started back in the last century, in 1975. Saying that building something like this is easy would definitely sound like a lie to the experts. The challenges kicked off right from the first question. How do you even build a network of tunnels like this, especially under a city? The popular method of creating underground tunnels with explosives wasn't an option, even though it was cheap and had been in use for ages. Blow it up, clear it out. Blow it up again, clear it out, and then all over again. But in this case, Chicago residents risked waking up not in their cozy beds, but somewhere underground. Plus, the constant vibrations kept everyone awake at night, so they decided to use tunnel boring machines instead. The largest of their time, with a diameter of 35 feet. Here they are in photos taken right on site. At first, there were worries even with machine drilling, so the underground tunnel grew only about 50 feet a day. But then things picked up speed. The network expanded by 150 to 200 feet daily, and so in 2006, construction was finished. At a depth of about 330 feet beneath the lively, bustling streets of Chicago lies a network of tunnels with diameters ranging from 9 to 33 feet. The first section, called Mainstream, stretches 40 miles. The second, the Plains, runs 26 miles. The third, O'Hare, reaches 7 miles. And the last, Calumet, is 37 miles long. Now, every city resident can confidently say, yep, I live on top of an anthill with some seriously long tunnels. This is an incredible project that took 30 years, a ton of effort, and lots of money, but it's far from over. No wonder this project started in Chicago. It's considered one of the largest in civil engineering. By the way, it's also no surprise they call it not just the Deep Tunnel Project, but the Tunnel and Reservoir Plan. Yep, it also includes building a massive reservoir. Actually, not the only one. Just like with the tunnels, the creators didn't reveal the full scale in the name, but we'll tell you there are supposed to be 3 reservoirs. The first hole, called Gloria Alito Majewski, was dug back in 1998. It can hold about 343 million gallons of liquid. The second reservoir is called Thornton, and here we've got, let's say, something on a whole other level. It went into operation in 2015, and the total construction cost came to $429 million. And for good reason. The previous reservoir's capacity of 343 million gallons seemed tiny compared to Thornton, which holds almost 8 billion gallons. That's why they also call it the Grand Canyon of Chicago. Nobody dug out such a massive pit from scratch. It was built in an old limestone quarry. But that didn't mean less work for the crew. They had to create a cement curtain to turn the pit into a kind of giant tub. The process, by the way, is pretty cool. Workers drill holes around the edge, then pump in cement under pressure. It seeps into the cracks and seals up the reservoir. Almost forgot about the third reservoir, called McCook. They started building it back in 1999, splitting the project into 2 phases. The first phase was finally completed in 2017. That is, it took a whopping 18 years. That's quite a stretch. But let's be real, it wasn't because of workers slacking or anything. Its final capacity turned out to be 3.5 billion gallons. Smaller than the last reservoir, but keep in mind, this is just phase 1. Once phase 2 is finished in 2029, McCook will get an additional 6.3 billion gallons. Purpose of construction. So what's the point of this project that's dragged on for more than 5 decades and isn't showing any signs of ending until at least 2029? The first thing to mention is that Chicago was founded in a lowland. In fact, it was built on a swamp. Plus, it's located between 2 rivers, the Chicago River and the Calumet River. So without proper sewage and drainage systems, the city was doomed to become like Atlantis, and they were made. However, as the city grew and rainfall became more frequent due to climate change, the system started to fail. Usually when it rained, the water would flow into the storm drains, and then it would end up in a vast network of small tunnels along with wastewater from the sewer pipes. There, it would either wait for treatment at the wastewater plants or flow into storage tanks. But when there's too much rain, which happens about 40 times a year, the tunnels and treatment plants can't keep up. As a result, wastewater spills over into the rivers, causing pollution. And sometimes there's just nowhere for the rainwater to go, leading to flooding. According to the Center for Neighborhood Technology, of the 15 largest metropolitan areas in the U.S., only Houston and Miami have higher flood insurance claim rates. According to a 2014 report, Chicago filed over 181,000 claims from 2007 to 2011, totaling $773 million. And that's not even accounting for the companies that probably don't report their data, or for homeowners who don't even apply for compensation. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources conducted a separate study and found that from 2007 to 2014, flood damage totaled $2.3 billion. Clearly, there's a problem, and it needs to be addressed. And at this sad moment for the city, an additional network of tunnels and reservoirs of the Deep Tunnel Project appeared. Now when it rains, the water flows into the existing system, then is intercepted by the new collectors, and after that it travels through a shaft into the tunnel network. It's important to note that the tunnel system, even without the reservoirs, could handle 2.4 billion gallons of water a day, which helped reduce river pollution by nearly 85%. With the massive reservoirs in place, the wastewater is stored there until it's treated. By the time the project is completed in 2029, the whole system will be able to hold more than 17 billion gallons of water. This will almost certainly help eliminate river pollution entirely and drastically reduce the risk of floods. Besides the obvious benefits, the system allows you to see more fish in the water. Since the 1970s, the number of species in the Chicago and Calumet rivers has grown from 10 to 80. Well, in the economy, of course. Thanks to fewer floods and less river pollution, a new waterfront was built with restaurants and bars. Plus, Chicago will clearly attract more people, since with the new system, you don't have to worry about stepping outside and ending up in a water adventure. However, the climate's changing, which is already causing strong storms around the Great Lakes, and there's no sign that things are getting better. According to the Climate Resource Protection Council, the number of storms that bring 2.4 inches of rain in 24 hours in the region could increase by 50% by 2039 and by 160% by the end of the century. And here Chicago has two options. The first one is expanding the tunnel network, which means a ton of money spent, a lot of work, but it's probably not going to stop the people who've already done so much to improve Chicago. Another option will surely win over fans of an eco-friendly approach to everything. It's about setting up green infrastructure, more specifically permeable pavement and green roofs. There could be some real doubts about how well it works, but it'll definitely play a role in the city's fight against flooding and pollution. The Chicago River. Chicago is clearly a city with some of the highest spending on infrastructure that helps protect it from floods and river pollution. You can find other cities around the world where similar things are being created, but what we know for certain is what makes Chicago unique. It's the only city located on the only river in the world that flows the wrong way. What's the cause? The history of Chicago has always been linked to flooding and pollution, and once again, the cause this time is wastewater. First of all, the Chicago River used to flow into Lake Michigan. And as a reminder, the city's residents drink water from there. Now, it's clear there are all sorts of filtration systems that can turn even the dirtiest water into something drinkable. Wastewater gets cleaned up at stations like Stickney, which can process 1.4 billion gallons of water per day. But obviously, this wasn't always the case. And Chicago kept on growing. More and more waste was flowing into Lake Michigan. People were drinking water that today would hardly be fit to use even in a washing machine. Probably one of those who didn't like the water was Ellis Sylvester Chesbrough. He was a talented engineer and clearly had an unusual way of looking at things because he came up with a crazy idea. What if they rerouted the main river so that the waste wouldn't flow into Lake Michigan anymore? The idea wasn't just crazy, it was impractical, pointless, and extremely expensive. But probably it was the only way to save Chicago from an environmental disaster. The plan was to build a 28-mile canal from the Chicago River to the Des Plaines River, which flows into the Mississippi. And not just any canal, but a waterway that also creates a slope. It had to make the water flow uphill against the laws of physics and be as far away from the lake as possible. And all this while there were no modern technologies, only horses, wagons, a lot of muscle, and dynamite. They say the whole process was quite a show. Even tourists came to see it. Believe it or not, they even developed special machines for the project. In the end, the workers dug up 1.1 billion cubic feet of stone, and over $1 billion was spent, adjusted for today's exchange rate. Finally, the people of Chicago were able to enjoy clean water. The dam holding back the river was destroyed. However, there was a problem for those living further down the Plains and Mississippi rivers. They sued Chicago. But in the end, the city won since there were other cities that could also pollute the river. Well, the people of Chicago were happy. Now, fans of fun facts may rejoice. The methods used in building the canal are now known as the Chicago School of Earth Moving. By the way, these methods were later used during the construction of the Panama Canal, another huge project. Tunnels in Milwaukee. A bit north of Chicago is Milwaukee. Do you know what these cities have in common? Aside from both using water from Lake Michigan, constant issues with water pollution and flooding. For example, in 1972, the state of Illinois sued Milwaukee and 3 other cities in Wisconsin, saying that they were a problem for society with their 200 million gallons of wastewater flowing into Lake Michigan every day. The problem was real and it had to be dealt with. In the end, Milwaukee started working on reducing the overflow from excessive rainfall. Overflow, by the way, is when there's too much liquid in the system, it can't handle it, and all the dirty water ends up in the streams and basements. So they started dealing with it the same way they did in Chicago, with tunnels. The first phase of construction was completed in 1993 when Chicago was still building its deep tunnels. 20 miles of underground passages were dug with diameters ranging from 16 to 32 feet. This system could hold 400 million gallons of water, which significantly reduced the number of overflows. The second phase was completed in 2006. A tunnel 7 miles long was built with a diameter of 20 feet. It can hold 88 million gallons of water. The third phase was finished quite recently, and the tunnel's really short, about 2 miles long with a diameter of 21 feet. In fact, it's just a continuation of the second phase. It's claimed that such a system is enough to collect 98.5% of the water that goes into the sewer system every year. However, as we've already discussed, the amount of water coming in is still increasing, which means this system needs to either be expanded or they need to come up with something else. In Milwaukee, they thought about it and decided that instead of expanding, they should limit the amount of water entering the sewage system. To do this, they could use barrels for collection, underground tanks, rooftop gardens, and porous surfaces. In short, the same eco-friendly approach. But there's also something new compared to Chicago. In Milwaukee, flood control pools and dams are being set up in areas vulnerable to floods. On top of that, parts of the Kinnickinnick River are being widened. Tearing up the concrete along the riverbanks is meant to help soak up more of the overflow water. A quarry in Atlanta. By the way, tunnels are used not only for storing wastewater, but also for transporting clean water. For example, in Atlanta, they decided to prepare for possible water shortages and emergencies since the city gets its water from just one source, the Chattahoochee River. The length, of course, isn't all that impressive, especially after all the underground tunnels we saw earlier. It's only about 5 miles. But it's unlikely that anyone set any limits on the length. It just so happened that right near the city there was an unused stone 400-foot deep quarry. They've connected it to 2 water treatment plants, and now Atlanta residents have 2.4 billion gallons of backup water to use in emergencies. Before, the city could only drink normal water for 3 days in such situations, but now it'll last for over a month. So these tunnels help not only with pollution, but also with preventing dehydration.